welcome or welcome back to my booktube channel, Goddess of Gore. My name is Vix and I like to talk about horror, thriller, sometimes fantasy and occasionally sci-fi books every week. This week I want to talk about all of the books I read in the month of June, and there's 15 to go through, so let's get on with it. As usual, I will go through the books in the order I read them. I'll pick my top 3 of the month and which was the biggest surprise, good or bad, who knows. So I kicked off the month with the last 2 months book club picks, and they were The Seven Sisters by Lucinda Riley and The Keeper of Lost Things by Ruth Hogan. I listened to The Seven Sisters on audiobook from my library, and I'm so glad I did because I never would have finished it if I had been reading it. Read by Tuppence Middleton. This is book 1 in the series of 7, with another book posthumously being compiled by her son. It follows the adopted sisters' backstories after the death of their father, multi-billionaire, affectionately known as Pa Salt. This book opens with Maya receiving the news of his death and the journey to her homeland of Brazil to find her own ancestry. It was historical, it was well written, and it wasn't for me. Maya receives a letter from Pa Salt with coordinates to her place of birth and not much else, as she goes on an adventure using her skill. She's a language genius, and I should add that each sister has a gift, and this is what I had half listened to in the description that I mistook for a supernatural power. She finds out all about why she was given up for adoption and all about her ancestry, and at the same time she finds love with the perfect man. It was a whopping 18 hours of audio, and it's a huge wedge of a book, and I can see why the other members of the book club enjoyed it so much, but really it was just a rich woman finding out she came from a Brazilian family that used to be the richest family in the village, blah 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 blah, and she has never been in love before, and the man is a perfect single father, and he's so handsome and everything is perfect. Rubbish. But I can see how probably the general readers will love the whole series. I was more concerned with why Pa Salt was going around the world collecting young girl babies. I mean, come on, who allowed this? Then The Keeper of Lost Things, and again it was a library book. I did enjoy this one, I have to say. Now, if you've read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstein, you will know what I'm talking about. If not, ignore this. So, in The Starless Sea, there's a story about a man who collects keys, and how everyone who has ever lost a key or has ever found a lock without a key, they come to this man's house and find what they need. There's keys everywhere. There's keys in cupboards, in drawers, under carpets, in spare rooms, on windowsills. There's keys everywhere. And that's the book I was thinking about all the way through this book. This is a book about a man who picks things up on the streets. So if you're walking around the park or down your street and you see a lost glove or a little toy, got on a bus and found a hair clip on the floor, Anthony Pairdrew would pick it up, make a small note of the object, where and when he found it, and he would keep it in his house. All because on the day of his fiance's death, he lost something she gave to him, and so he begins to keep all of the lost things with the intention of reuniting them with the owners. But unfortunately, he dies before he can. So his assistant Laura inherits the house and all of these lost things, and she must now do it all for him. With the help of Sunshine, the daughter of the neighbour, and Freddie, the handsome gardener, they set up a website to catalogue all of the items and put out a plea to the general public to check the site and get in touch if they see their item. Along the way, we're told stories of how the items were lost, happy tales, sad tales and terrible tales, I particularly liked the jigsaw piece story. This book captured me and held me prisoner, and I loved it. Then it was The Dying Squad by Adam Simcox. I was expecting something similar to the film R.I.P.D. Rest in Peace Department, and this was about 0.1% like that, as in a cop dies and he gets a job in the afterlife as a cop to find out what happened to him. But in this one, he can't remember his life before he died, other than the last few minutes before he was shot. This book is a gritty crime mystery that involves drug gangs, bent carpers that would give Hastings a heart attack. That's a Line of Duty reference. It's a UK police procedural drama show. If you haven't watched it, do. It's the best thing that the BBC's ever done for 30 years. 6 series, 35 episodes. It won't take you long. Go on. But the book, it wasn't bad. I enjoyed all the memory recovery of Joe Lazarus and Daisy May that was involved, because it was like reading a thriller mystery. But all the afterlife stuff, not interesting to me, and I didn't exactly get most of it. I understood it was some kind of purgatory, but meh, not relevant to the story really. I should add that this was a copy I received from NetGalley for review. Next was another NetGalley ebook, and that was PJ and the Paranormal Pursuers by Jacqui Dempster, and yes, it was pretty good. I did get confused about the intended audience for this book because it read very much like a middle grade, but it had references to films and TV shows which were definitely not middle grade. But every character was so good, if a little stereotypical, but so what? It follows PJ, who, after the death of his mother, is brought to Edinburgh, Scotland, to live with the only relative he has, his Aunt Katie. He has to leave behind all of his friends, neighbours and even his beloved dog in New York. And he lets her know that he's not happy about it one bit. The book starts to get spooky pretty much from the get-go, after an encounter in the old building that Aunt Katie has a flat in, and after Katie suggests that he go to a local grief counselling group, he befriends 3 other kids who are trying to deal with their own losses. After talking for a while, they bond over the fact that they love ghost stories and ghost hunting TV shows. So PJ tells them about the ghost in Katie's building, and they start to investigate. This book had all the feels you would expect with a cosy paranormal middle grade book, but it was just spooky enough to keep the attention of an older or adult reader. The only difference being that it was a bunch of kids running the show. Honestly, if you like reading kids books or have an older child who enjoys ghost books, this one I can recommend. Great ghosts, found family, everything turning out all right in the end, overcoming deaths and loss, what's not to like? All was going well with the NetGalley books until Midsummer Mysteries by Agatha Christie, described as Christie's famous characters solving crime in the sun from the Cornwall coast to the French Riviera. And what I got was not that. Yes, I suppose they did take place in those locations, but honestly, there were no descriptions of the summer, no beaches, no ports, nothing. They could have been in a warehouse in Birmingham for all I knew. My favourite short story was The Disappearance of Mr. Davenham, and this was probably one of the longer stories, and Jane in Search of a Job was another one. But otherwise, what a letdown. This was my first written experience of Agatha Christie, and it was rubbish. If I didn't want to actually read full Christie stories, I would be put off by this collection. But it does have a lovely cover. And then, as if one bad book isn't enough, why not add another? House of Sky and Breath by Sarah J. Maas. Yeah, I went back for more. Why? Because I hate myself. Thank the gods that I listened to this on library audio and I didn't buy the book like I did with the first one, because, Jesus, honestly, do I have to listen about the size of an angel's genitalia? Do I actually care how moist someone's knickers are? I know I'm not the target age for these books, and really, I have seen quite a bit of my fair share of genitals in all shapes and sizes. Your description of an ankle-scraping penis doesn't impress me, Sarah. Ha! At one point I did think the story was going to go somewhere, but no. It was just a lot of incredibly horny horn dogs and heavy wet crotches. Thank you, Ashley Beegan, for coming to the rescue with Lucy's Coming for You. Even if it was middle of the road psychological thriller, it was still better than the Crescent Moon series. Set in Derby, this is about an incredibly intelligent and overqualified Summer who works as an advocate for mental health inpatients. A particularly violent patient named Lucy goes missing, and when this is queried by Summer, all of the staff claim there's never been a patient called Lucy. And so begins a confusing conspiracy about the treatment of inpatients under a certain doctor's care. Unreliable narrators all around, and the general consensus was that all of the characters in this book suffered with some kind of mental health problem, big time. But it was quite fun. I did find myself gripped on tender hooks, waiting to find things out at various points in the reading. And then finally, hallelujah, I finished The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie. It was a slightly slow burn to begin with, but by the end I was flying through. Everyone who has read Abercrombie's work praises his characters and world building, and they are not wrong. His writing is impeccable. Based on Ferro, the only female main character, he has written her so well, which I know can be a bit of a problem with a lot of male fantasy writers. I will be returning to the series as the months go on with eagerness. This was basically the setup book for the rest of the trilogy. And then we have the one, the only cult favourite, the booktube lovey in the cosy fantasy world, Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. And wow, I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. I did not realise how much cosy fantasy was needed in the world right now. I mean, I loved House in the Cerulean Sea, but I didn't think cosy was what I needed in my life. I was raving about it to anyone who would listen. I need a physical copy. I need fan artwork. I need to open a cafe and hire my own thimble to bake pastries. If you have a small hole in your world right now, I suggest you get a copy of this book and read it, because heartless bastards like myself need a bit of cosy too sometimes. Trust me. Go on. Go on. I'll wait while you get a copy. So, this is about an orc named Viv who takes her share payment of one last mission and goes to the town of Thune and opens a cafe to sell this weird gnomish bean water called coffee. Overcoming literally every obstacle, it becomes a rip-roaring success. The end. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that. But the baddies aren't too bad and the goodies aren't too good. It was in the world of Goldilocks. Just right. So, then, from my book club a few months ago, Where the Crawdads Sing. And I swear to God, they said, "Oh, read it. You missed out on such a good book. It was the best book I've ever read in my whole life." Was it? Fuck. It was predictable. It was just like every other book. Poor, neglected child. And I'm in no way belittling the life that was written for this girl.
looked out for by the poor residents of a poor community, and all her siblings have been beaten by their drunk father until they were old enough to run away and left her all alone. Comes good after turning from ugly duckling to beautiful swan, taught to read by the boy who saw her inner beauty. And it all turns all right in the end. You know the kind. Except for when she's accused of murdering the local heartthrob and imprisoned while waiting trial. The whole town turns witch hunt of a sort. Honestly, it wasn't that good, and unless you like this kind of book and this is your thing, I would say you shouldn't have to suffer it too. But Reese Witherspoon is just about to release the TV show, so then it was the long awaited for me, Tender is the Flesh, and wow, this was written so unlike a horror book that it may actually be one of the most articulated horror books I've ever read. Augustina Baztereka wrote and Sarah Moses translated something truly beautiful. Now, I'm not sure how to describe this book, because apparently when I described it to my partner, he said I should stop reading horror if I didn't find it disturbing, because he found it disturbing from just my description. So I don't want to get myself in too much trouble here, but I didn't find the actual ethical side of this subject bad. I'm not a meat eater, and the reason I'm not a meat eater is because the thought of raising animals for slaughter is abhorrent to me. So the descriptions of the slaughters in the book were of no shock. This is literally how animals are treated every minute of every day in every single corner of the world. So to turn that around and put humans in their place, so what? And if this book can draw your attention to that and make you eat just a little bit less meat a week, that's pretty good to me. What I did find a bit was the sexual violence. The tone of the book, the way it is written, is so matter of fact that it felt very real, it's emotionless, and that was what disturbed me the most. The rich people hunting parties was somewhat disturbing too, but mostly the couple of mentions of being raped to death were my okay, that's not nice. Eating other humans, fine, but if you can handle all of that, I would say read it just so you can experience the crisp cleanness of Augustina's writing. It was truly impeccable. Mwah. Perfection. Then I read a book that was given to me by NetGalley and was released last year called The Hollows by Mark Edwards, and when I finished this book I read the bit about the author, and it turns out that the author, Mark, lives not too far away from me, so I will be mentioning his name to my local book club. Maybe they will put his books on the list. Maybe not this one, because this one they wouldn't read, they wouldn't enjoy it because they don't like scary books. So, this one is about a dad called Tom from England who, after the divorce from his American wife, comes over to America during the summer to take a holiday with his daughter Frankie now that they live in America. I said America a lot then. He unknowingly rents a cabin, or as we would call it, probably a chalet, in the gorgeous forest in Maine that was once upon a time a camp for school trips where two teachers were killed and posed with pagan writing all around them, written in their blood of course, and the local metalhead team was blamed for the deaths, and he has never been found, presumed on the run to Canada. Tom meets the fellow holidaymakers only to be told they're here because it's almost 20 years to the day that the killings happened, and pretty much everybody else there is a true crime fan. Frankie befriends a fellow teen, and together they manage to upset the locals and find themselves preyed upon by a couple of sicko twins. Lovely, but when things start to go missing and then the deaths start to occur, they think they have a copycat in their company. And this truly did turn Tom and Frankie's holiday into a nightmare. I thoroughly enjoyed this book, and pretty much from the get-go I was hooked, and I killed off the last 50% in one sitting, because when Vix has got to know what's happening, she's got to know now.
Again, I would very much recommend this book. I had never heard of the author before and I was really surprised by it. I wasn't expecting it to be good, let's be honest. And then I listened to a book that was free on Audible for members that I mentioned in my folk horror recommendations list, and that was The Marriage Pact by Michelle Richmond, and read by Tom Taylorson. And again, I wasn't expecting too much from this after I deep dived into the reviews on Goodreads, but it wasn't too bad. Some parts of it were really dark and disturbing. The interrogation techniques were just outright humiliation, torture, and this truly was a cult in the extreme. So it was about newlyweds, Alice, a ex-grunge band guitarist, now lawyer, and Jake, a psychologist. For a wedding gift, one of Alice's friends gives her membership to an inclusive club called the Pact. Their sole promise was to keep their marriage happy and healthy, but the punishments start to become uncomfortable when they don't get home on time, and downright overkill when you meet up with another member without permission. The enforcements of a happy marriage were brutal and fantastic. The only thing that spoiled this book to me was the ending. Other than that, it wasn't half bad if you like cult books that aren't the usual cult books. Then 2 books I finished at the start of July, but I'm still counting them for this month because, as I've said before, this is my wrap up and I'll make my own rules. And that was Herland and the Luminous Dead. Herland by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. So, this book was massively oversold to me. I expected ruthless women, aggressive women, taking no crap women, using men to get pregnant, imprisoning them and keeping them docile. You know, role reversal, being kept indoors, patted on the head and told that they're a good boy every now and again. That kind of stuff. But no. These women were pleasant, living their best lives in a utopia, completely vegan, idyllic heaven. I wanted cannibals and I got vegans. The letdown was strong with this one. And here's a little spoiler. In fact, from this moment on it's spoilers. How did they not bludgeon Terry and feast on his flesh? He was the most obnoxious, perverted, misogynist out of a group of rich, educated white men. I thought Charlotte was a free thinker. I thought she was left field. And I got 3 white male intruders, nay, invaders, on a completely female island. They reproduced asexually, they farmed and they built, and they come in. You've got Terry who wants to capture any of the very young girls because the women are old and ugly. And then they mansplain how better the world was, and by world I mean America, and then the women marry them. Yeah, they get married. I mean, what the actual fuck? Radical? This is not. And then finally, The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling, and wow, this book is possibly the first book that has ever made me genuinely claustrophobic, and I am not claustrophobic. I felt alone, smothered in a tight-fit spacesuit, caving gear and a full-face helmet. I saw the whole book as a film in my head and it was so unsettling. So basically it's about a woman called Gaia. That's how I'm pronouncing it, correct me if I'm wrong. And a voice called M. M is the voice at the other end of a caving expedition of 1. Gaia didn't know it was a company of 1. She thought she was going down with a team to research some caves where so far no one has come out alive. To undergo the mission, cavers have to have some surgery of some kind to put a cannula in their stomach in which canisters of feed are attached for nutrients, so a bit like a peg feed, and have urinary catheters and bowel colostomies put in. Signing up for a holiday in a spacesuit is not for the faint-hearted. Along the caves, being all alone, exhausted, hungry and possibly over-medicated, Gaia begins to see and hear things that literally creeped me out. Never mind the movements out of the corner of her helmet. There was one scene where she's in some water, yeah? She looks up and she sees some eyes on the top of her head, just there in the water, silently, watching in a cave where there's nobody else supposed to be there. Things start going missing. The bodies of past crews start to show up, propped up or just laid out. She loses contact with Em at some points. Honestly, the only problem I had with this book was it was a cast of 2. It took a bit of getting used to, apart from the parts where she's watching films of past crews being interviewed at the beginning of the missions, and Em occasionally showing her face during a live feed from her end. It's basically just Gaia, told from her point of view. It was a very lonely book, and I think this helped with the isolation feel. I just wasn't used to the lack of speech in a book. It's not outright scary, but it is unsettling, tense with occasional creeps. I had some cave ambience on when I was reading it. It definitely added to the feels. I recommend doing that. So that is it. All of the books have been reviewed, but which were my top 3 of the month? Play the music. In third position, it's The Luminous Dead by Caitlin Starling. It was such a good, tense horror sci-fi. And almost there, it's number 2, Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrica. But without a doubt, my top book of the month is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. And I think I may have a new favourite book of the year. I adored it. I loved it. I want to live in Thune. It's amazing, and I think you should all read it. Then you can tell me how much you loved it too. But what was the biggest surprise? Drum roll, please. Midsummer Mysteries can have that award this month, and not for all the good reasons. I'm still surprised how much this book unimpressed me. As I said, this would honestly put me off Agatha Christie books based on this short story collection, and I wouldn't waste my time on another themed collection like this again. Just stick to her full-length books. That is it. June is well and truly wrapped up. Thank you all so much for watching. I am so grateful that you do. Like and subscribe if you want to. Tell me, what did you read last month that amazed you the most? Have I sold Legends and Lattes to you yet? Now, the nights are getting warmer and you may have to get some air circulating around your room at night. Maybe get a breeze coming in through your window. But remember, there's more than just creepy crawlies sneaking around. Violets are blue, blood is red. Your window was open, now it's waiting under your bed. Oh, try and sleep well tonight. Until next time, bye bye.